All right, so we are not on YouTube. So let's enable low latency. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to record this and then we will upload it to YouTube. So let's see. Record. All right, we are on record now. Oh wait, I think we're on YouTube now. Okay, I just got confirmation. All right, well, we'll record it just in case either way. So thank you guys for your patience while we sorted that out. It says we're still streaming. All right, guys, I want to click one more time here and just make sure. Oh, I see us. Okay. All right, we are good. Now I can see the chat channel. All right, we're good. Mute. Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome, YouTube. I went over a few things about where to find the box program and some things. If you want to check on that, you can go back to our Facebook page and check it out. But otherwise, I think we're basically ready to get started. So in your patterns, the first thing I want to bring your attention to is this Cosmic Fireworks introduction booklet. And I'm going to go over this really quickly and then we'll move over to Judy. There's also a little thing, like a little handout in each of those. Maybe, can you bring me that, Mom? It's actually this camera here. Oh. She's putting it in front of the wrong camera. So this little thing, everyone should have one of these. On one side, it shows the picture of what you're making. It shows you which part of the quilt you're making right here. And on the back, it has a picture of what you're making for this specific class. And then it has all of the cutting information and the labeling information. So if you got a pre-cut kit, this step is already done for you. If you did not get a pre-cut kit, then you need to make sure to cut your fabrics out each month according to this before you get started on making your project. Okay. And then in your introduction booklet, the introduction booklet has a lot of information in it. I'm going to switch over here to an actual image of it. So the introduction booklet has let's see, just a description of the project. It has information on corrections and where to go if there's corrections to this pattern. It has a general supply list, paper piecing supply list. It has some general definitions and terms that we use. And then it goes through some basic information that's in all of our patterns. See, someone asked, will this be available to view later? Yes, this will be available to view later. It has information on how to use all of your templates. So if this is the first time you've ever done a Quiltworx pattern, although we'll cover some of this today, it might be good for you to just review through most of this. It also has some yardage information. It talks a little bit about quilt stir, cutting instructions, and then it talks about chain piecing, where we basically set all of our patterns up so that you can add the same section to each of the units for all of the units you're making, and then you go to the second section, and then you go to the third, but you do the same step on every block each time, and it really helps keep you organized and keep you from making mistakes. So we talk about that. The other thing that's in there is an LP sheet. So this is a large newsprint. We show you a small image of it, but it has all of your final assembly instructions. So make sure to keep track of that. We put in a queen size version sheet. If you're making the wall, just ignore adding those outside borders. And if you're making a king, we talk about that on the second page, how to adapt the information that's on that other sheet to the king size quilt as well. So definitely read through all of this information. Then we have some fabric information. So we have individual charts for the whole pattern for each of the fabrics. And this is the same stuff that's on that little handout sheet that I gave you, but we just show you each quarter. This shows you the whole quilt. And then we have some yardage charts because we have 4 different colorways. I provided a yardage chart for each of those colorways with all of the different fabric references that each of those fabrics are used for. That will all make more sense when you start watching us go through this process if you're new to it. But in the meantime, these are your overall yardage charts. It also talks about backing, binding, quilting designs. And you'll notice your patterns don't have this in there, but we did find a few mistakes in the yardage charts as we were going, so there is a correction for that. So just go out and check it and see if it applies to any of your colorways. If it's shown in pink, that's a correction that would need to be made. So it's basically yardage charts. There's also a YouTube video schedule on page 15 for the rest of the year, so you can mark your calendars. We will have events posted on Facebook as well and in the Quiltworx Box Club group that you can reference. And then it shows the different layouts that you could make this quilt in. So that's the information that's in your introduction booklet. It's mostly general information and then final assembly details and yardage charts. So with that, I think we can now switch over and have Judy start the demo. So, all right, Mom, you're on.
All right. Do you want to introduce the quilt that's on the wall?
Oh, yeah. So behind Judy is a quilt called Imperial Crown. This is our brand new publication. We just got all of the papers and everything, and I think they're actually starting to ship the pre-ordered patterns today. And kits will be going out by the end of the week for wholesale consumers, and you can now purchase that on the website. It's done out of Tim Holtz fabrics. And if you want more information on that, you can find it on our website. I will have Quiltster layouts for it ready probably tonight, where you can go in and color your own versions of it. And then the other thing is, if you're looking for kits in this specific colorway, you can find those on the Quiltster Marketplace. Don't forget, if you have one of the coupon books in your boxes, there's coupon codes for kits in there, and they apply to anything and everything that you want to purchase. 1 kit per quarter and 1 pattern per quarter from Quiltworx. And then there's coupons also for a number of other like quilt shops and instructors, and they have some great opportunities to purchase at discounted prices as well. So that's one of the huge benefits of the Box Club. All right, I think you're ready.
Okay, and then I'm just going to tell you, this was one of the quilts that we did at our Quilt University last fall, and it was made by
Cindy Haddock.
Cindy Haddock. So, anyway, it's a cool quilt. All right, everybody. So, we're going to start today, since this is the first video of the year, and we have a lot of new box students. We're going to go over some basic ideas in this particular class, okay? So, one of the first things I'm going to do is just talk to you a little bit about tools, all right? So basically, we get a lot of conversation about glue. It's very common that we use 3 different types of glue. We actually have another type that we use, which is an applique glue, but we're not doing any applique right now. So this is actually a repositionable glue, all right? Which means that if you rub it on the back of the paper, put it on your fabric, you can pull the paper off and put it back on, pull it off. All right. If you rub it onto the fabric, you're going to get way too much, and you don't want to butter your paper with it. You just need a little bit to hold it in place. if you're working with a big sheet, you don't need to rub, apply so much of it that it never moves. So just be careful with it. The one thing you want to know about repositionable glue is it does gum up your needle, so you do have to clean your needle on occasion. If you get too much of it on the paper, it's going to rub off onto your machine. All you need to do is just get some Clorox wipes, some alcohol wipes, Lysol wipes, anything, or just a wash rag and wipe it off, and it comes right off for you, okay? I quite often, when we're doing a lot of sewing, I usually clean the bottom of my pressure foot probably 3 to 4 times a day, okay? And I also wipe down my needle a little bit as well if I get too much of it on there when we're doing demos and stuff. If you're working with really dark fabric like black and navy blue, I really recommend not to use it because you can see the little flakes from it on those fabrics, where on your other fabrics you don't see them, and they just, wear off and after time. So it has some really, really beneficial things that we like, and the number one thing we like about it is we can put it on a layout sheet, lay it down, it smooths it out, and then if we need to have more support, we just work with flower pens to put a couple pins in our paper. The other thing we love about it is when we put it on the back side of section 1, the fabric sticks to it, and then when we remove the papers, that fabric comes off, or the fabric and the paper come apart really easy. You don't have to go in there and do a lot of getting everything wet to get all the paper off. So the other thing too that we like about it is that it doesn't, like if you hit it with an iron, it doesn't bake the fabric to the back of the paper. So that's kind of nice about it too, all right? We use it all the time. Use it sparingly and you'll love it, okay? And if you don't love it, then don't use it. It's a really simple choice. It's either yay or nay. This particular glue is a fabric glue stick, okay? It comes with a whole bunch of fabric, or not fabric, but glue, and you can get these in tubes. You can get refill tubes, all right? And we use this glue for gluing the raw edges when we're doing curved piecing. We don't put it on the back of the paper to glue it to our fabric unless I'm working with like something white, because as soon as it dries, it's going to come off. So you don't want to go through and put glue on the back side of like 40 pieces paper and then expect it to stay there. By the time you get to the bottom of your pile, it's going to fall off for you, okay? It's also more expensive. Whoops. It's also more expensive, okay? So when I'm working with a project, it's very normal for me to go through 4 or 5 of these tubes if I'm doing a lot of curved piecing, and I have a tendency to do a lot of curved piecing. All right, so you want to, that's what we use this for, but we do a lot of gluing on the raw seams when we're doing curves, and even when we're doing some straight line stuff, which you're going to see me use it today. All right. This glue, you got some of this in your box, and this is just a regular Yoo-hoo stick, all right? It's it will come off the fabric. It's fabric-based glue, and it sticks the paper to the fabric really nice on the back, but if you iron it, after putting that first piece on, if you don't pull the paper away from the fabric before you iron, it will bake it right into it, and then you have to scrub the paper off the back. And so it's cheap. It works really well for a lot of applique. I've been using it for 20 years. Is it my favorite? No, but we use it. All right? Okay. This is a highlight marker. We use that when we're actually marking our papers, and so one of the things I do a lot with this is when I'm going through my papers, I write where I highlight the template layout sheet number. Because if I don't, I have a tendency to look at the unit number and think, oh, well, that's the template layout sheet, when it's not. So I like to go through all my layout sheets before I cut them off my paper and just run through and mark everything. So I'm going to show you that demo as well today. These are for those people who have a hard time seeing. Sometimes you want to trace the lines and you can't see very well. You can actually use a black marker before you attach it to the fabric and everything, and you can actually mark your lines on the front, and then you can see them on the back because it'll go through and shadow through to the back. Okay, a lot of our CIs use this method to teach people, and when you start, if you're new to it, it works pretty good. So I'll try to remember to show you how that works too today. Did you say they got this little thing?
Yes.
This is it's like a stiletto. I use a stiletto, and then I was showing this little tool last fall from one of my CIs, and it's got a little curve on it. And I have found that I love this thing, and I use it all the time. So I use my stiletto, and I use this little curve as well, and to hold my fabric when I'm sewing. You just need something to write with. This is actually a mechanical pencil, and it has just some really lightweight lead in there, so if I have to mark something on my fabric, I can do so. Pair of curved scissors. These aren't the straight scissors, these are curved scissors, and I use them when I'm cutting threads. I use these more than anything else. All right, so I love my curved scissors. This is the Acorn starch pen, and you'll probably see me using it. I use it to press my fabric when I'm actually just doing demos rather than running over to the iron. I can actually run this on something that's wrinkled, and it'll lay it right down for me. And then I use it at the ironing board as well for pressing really long points, which this pattern has a lot of really long points, and so it's going to be really easy to get little folds in those tips. So we're going to use this pen quite a bit today. So I'm going to put it over by my iron. All right, and of course a rotary cutter, whatever size you like. I use the big one. All right, so that's a list of the tools. You're also going to need some flower pens, and we have several flower pens in here in my pin cushion, and paper clips. We use a lot of paper clips. I like the big ones because they're easy to put on and off the paper to glue, or not to glue, but to hold several of your layers of fabric with the paper clips. So you're going to see me using paper clips a lot today. And then we also have binder clips. We use all different sizes of binder clips, little ones, big ones, giant ones, and they work as well. So we have boxes of lots of binder clips. Okay. For those that are new, the size needle that I use on my machine, I actually like the 70. Size 70 when I'm doing paper piecing. It does leave a little bit of a smaller hole. It's a sharp, and it pierces through the paper. It doesn't make as much noise as a universal needle going through the paper, and so because of the sharp tip. If you can't see to thread a size 70 needle, then just use the 80. It's not going to make a difference with your paper. The biggest reason why I like the 70 is it's a little bit quieter needle when it's going through the machine. Doesn't change the sewing or anything. Okay, most of the things that I sew with are actually cottons and batiks, and it doesn't seem to matter which needle I use as far as for the type of sewing I do. My biggest reason I use the 70 is because I don't like the noise that the bigger needles just leave. And when you sew a lot, there's a lot of noise there. All right? So, thread, some of you are going to ask me about thread. I would say anything between a 50 weight to, I know some of my students and instructors are using an 80 weight thread. I actually prefer this 50s and 60 weights for the paper, but there are several of them that are using the lighter weight threads. So if you're happy with that, then go ahead and use your lighter weight threads when you're sewing your papers. I think a lot of it would depend on what type of fabric that you're using. If you're working with batiks, I think the lighter weight thread will be okay for it. If you're working with cottons, it may be a little bit small to be able to see, and it might not hold up to the strength of removing the paper, but you know, you got to try it, and if you like that lighter weight thread, then use it. All right, so here's your package that we're working with. So we're going to get inside here because I want to show you what it looked like before I started my demonstration. So this was a nice package, and we have it all sorted out for you. It's got the cover sheet, and if you look at the way the fabric's set up, has fabric A1 on the top, fabric A1. So this one had two choices for fabric A1, and then we have a fabric A3, which is one choice, and we have a fabric A5, which was one choice, and then we have a fabric A6A, we have a fabric A6B. Now you can use only one fabric on the A6 color as well. You have two options with your instructions. One of them is the standard option, and if that's the case, you would only get one color for all of these. If you use the alternative, you have, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different colors. So you have an A, B, C, D, E, and F, I think. Yep. So anyway, these are our different options here. And some of these on this one, actually, we use this color several times. And so we must have like this, and then one of these, and then one of these again. So we're repeating some of those colors in there, okay? And it's probably repeated in a couple other areas in there. So all of these labels are on there for you to look at your instructions when you open those up, and it'll tell you where those are used, all right? So let's lift this up and put this back on here. Judelle went over your introduction booklet. Don't lose your introduction booklet. You want this until the end of your quilt. That means you have to keep track of it for 1 year, all right? So don't lose it. Okay, these are your instructions. Now these instructions are only for what we're working on today. You will get another set of instructions with the next box, and another, each box comes with its own set of instructions. That's the way our mixers work, okay? So when you open your pattern up, you're going to find your foundation papers. So we're just going to go have a little bit of discussion about the foundation papers. And what I want to do, I'm not going to show you how I cut them, but I'm going to tell you how I cut them, all right? So when I get my foundation papers out of a pattern, I like to actually look to see how many numbers are the same. So if you look at this inventory number right here in the corner, that's 823. The one underneath it is 823. That means these two pages are exactly the same, and so I can cut them at the same time by stacking them on a light table and matching all of my lines. And I can put repositionable glue if I want, but the glue I like the best is actually your Yoo-hoo glue, because it doesn't, repositionable glue is like a little kid with sticky fingers. Every time they touch something, they leave sticky stuff all over. If you use this Yoo-hoo stick, you can actually put the Yoo-hoo in the areas. Don't put it on your papers, but put it in the open areas that are going to get cut away. and you can glue all your papers together, and then you can, on a light table, you can usually see through 4 layers to see how they line up. And then you can just lay your ruler right down on there and start cutting, and you can cut 4 layers at a time, all right? And if you have to cut 8 layers, you can set up a group of 4 and a group of 4, and then you can take pins and pin the 2 groups of 4 together to cut out all 8 layers at one time. I do that all the time, but I really like the Yoo-hoo glue for doing the stacking. Just don't put it on your foundation, on your units, because those are the parts you want to come apart. You want the rest of it to stick together so it doesn't move when you're cutting. All right? So this, when we get down to the next sheet, these are actually template pages, and it says TP, which means everything on this is a template page. This one also has an assembly graphic that tells you how to assemble the unit when you start to sew it together, right? And underneath there is another template page. So when you do the template pages, you don't cut them together because they're all different sizes. And if you tried to cut through 2 layers, you're going to end up cutting this one all apart. So you have to cut those out singly. So we're going to start here at the top, and I'm going to explain to you how you're going to cut these out. All right, these are my units. Anything that says unit on it is what a great big letter. See how it says unit A1, unit A3, and then there's a unit A2. They're big bold letters. Those are your foundation papers. That's what you sew on. And we do get people that always ask, well, how do I know which ones I'm sewing on? Well, if it has sew lines on it that says line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and it's got these dash lines on it, it's got some hatching on it. Some of our older patterns didn't have hatching. But if you actually look in your pattern, it'll have pictures of them and tell you which ones are your foundation units and which ones are templates, okay? So, what I like to do is I like to take my papers, lay them onto my table, and then I lay my ruler down, and I basically put it about 1/8 of an inch outside there. I get them all stacked together, and I cut. And then I have another ruler, that's my curved ruler, and I use that to do all of the curves, okay? So I can, if I have the outside of my papers glued, I can actually go around and do all of the straight lines. So I would just start right here, and I'd cut here, I'd cut here, I'd cut a straight line here, 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 and just go through and cut all my straight lines. And then I can come back and I can cut all my curved lines and lift the pieces out of the whole group of paper. Now, does it make a difference whether I cut the straight lines first or the curved lines? No. You can cut all the curved lines first, or you can cut all the straight lines. One of the things you don't want to do, and I see a lot of people when they first start doing foundation paper piecing, they'll just grab their scissors and they just start cutting around a chunk, setting it there, cutting around another chunk, and they leave lots of excess around their paper, sometimes 1/2 inch, sometimes 1 inch. They'll leave this chunk over here. When you do that, then you can only sew 1 unit at a time. You have to have your papers trimmed down to about 1/8 of an inch in order to do all of your chain piecing, which is the technique that we teach, okay? So if you cut them all out with a pair of scissors and then come back and cut them all out with your rotary cutter to clean them off, you have to go through the process twice. It's like driving to the store to buy a gallon of milk and then going home and driving back to the store to buy another gallon of milk. There's no point in it, okay? You want to cut it all out one time rather than spending 4 hours cutting them out and then 4 hours again cutting them out a second time because you didn't cut them out the first time, all right? And that can all be done by just having a ruler, cut on the lines like this, and then come around here, roll around these lines, okay? So there's your lecture about cutting. And that's about 1/8 of an inch. And if you read your instructions in your introduction booklet, it actually explains how you're supposed to cut those out. All right. So when we're cutting out, oh, before I go any further, one of the other things I like to do before I cut out all my papers is I like to kind of look to see where I want to put my colors. Okay, so I can go through my instructions and see where my fabrics are going to go, look at the pictures and kind of get an idea. And then I like to go through before I cut them all up, and I'll just put all of my colors, put my little samples on one of the sheets. And then when I clip them all together, I know what's going to be going on that sheet without picking up the wrong fabrics. And it's really easy. The other nice thing about that is sometimes you'll go through, and when you're coloring something, you'll change where we have the light backgrounds versus the dark backgrounds. You can change those out however you want. But then when you're looking at your papers, you can kind of tell, well, where they have their accent color, I want to put my white. And where they have all of their background colors, you can put a swatch of your black. And then you don't forget what you're doing when you're setting up all your cutting. All right? So now we're going to go to the template sheets. On your templates, I see this happen too. So if I can add all kinds of excess around my papers, then why can't I add the excess around the templates? The number one reason why is because if I tell you to cut a 2.5 inch strip, this little template's only going to be about 2 3/4 inches, or maybe just a hair under what that actual size strip is. Okay, and if I need all 42 inches of my fabric, because my templates are like long like this, and I can only get 4 on there, and I need to get those 4. If I have all this excess, then what I'm having to do is overlap all my papers. And when I try to put it on the strips, I don't always get it onto the strips right. So then when I start cutting and I get all my cuts done, some of my cuts are always too small because I didn't pay attention and I was sloppy at cutting out my papers. So what I like to do is these in your instructions tell you to lay it right on the line, and you're going to cut right on the line. Then it's guaranteed that you can actually make it fit on the strips that we tell you to cut previously. All right. So the other thing about the template layout sheets that I like to do, again, is once I have an idea what I'm going to do color-wise, I like to put my fabric samples on my layout sheets too, so that when I pick it up, I don't actually pick up the wrong papers. This happens a lot when you start working with big template layout sheets, is you pick up the wrong paper and put it onto the wrong strip. Okay, so if you go through and add a bunch of those little samples on here before you cut it out, it makes it really nice. So this particular one, I have to cut it apart, which we'll show you how to do that, because it was built as a layout sheet, so it's all cut from the same fabric. But if I want all my spikes to be a different color, I can cut these spikes apart, the layout sheet apart, and use those as single templates. So I just went through and added all my little swatches to the templates so I don't accidentally pick up the wrong template. And it's easier to sit down and read all of this information and go through your pattern, because now I know what's in the pattern and I know what I want to be doing. Okay, so these are just some little tips and tricks that you probably won't see me go through again over the year. All right, so we also have, again, this is a layout sheet, this is a layout sheet. Remember I told you that I like to go through and mark my layout sheets. So I come in here and this says template layout sheet number 7, so I'd mark it. This one says layout sheet number 2 and I'd mark it. This one's layout sheet number 1. Okay. When I cut those out, I just set all my layout sheets in one pile. If it's a template, a single template, it goes in another pile. And if you have something that says T template on it, that means it's a traditional size template. There's no excess fabric that you're using with it for paper piecing. It's something that's sewn onto a paper pieced unit after you've removed the paper. So T templates stand for traditional size pieces. All right. So I like to keep my templates, the types of templates, separate. And then as I'm cutting them out, after I get them cut out, I sort them numerically. So I'll go through and I'll have template layout sheet number 1 on the top, template layout sheet number 2. Because some of our patterns will have up to 22 to 30 template layout sheets for those patterns. And it just makes it easier for us to go through and pair it up to the fabric, okay? So you're going to cut the templates down out on the line. And if you want, you can put some little swatches on it before you start cutting them apart, okay? This one is a template layout sheet, and it says template layout sheet number 3, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4 template layout sheets number 3. The reason we do that is because these have some TRP lines that have to be sewn on before we, so we have to have a single template for every one that we cut out. And we do that when we're working with veins, and I'll explain that to you as we go through and work with the veins today, all right? So you're going to have 2 sheets of templates that you have to cut out. We're going to fold this up. I've already got them cut out, so I'm going to go show you how to sort through them. Okay, so what I did is when I cut out my papers, I actually clipped all of the papers together, and every one, so I have my A2s together, my A1s together, and my A3s together. So in your instructions, normally it will tell you how many bags you have to have. And this one says that we want 2 bags. We want an A1 bag and an A2 bag. So we're going to actually put A1 and A2 foundation papers in my first bag. And then we're going to grab another bag over here. And we're going to put the unit 3 foundation papers in this bag. The reason for the bags is because when we start cutting everything out, we start slipping that fabric into the bags. So now all I have is just the fabric that I need for this unit and the fabric that I need for these units, okay? So we've got those in the bag. And so before I start separating out my templates, I want to show you how we use the curved ruler, okay? So the radius on this ruler that we have, we use this radius in a lot of our patterns, but even if the radius doesn't fit perfectly, we can still use it. What we do is we lay it down on the curve and we match it up along the end of the curve, and then we roll the ruler around and cut on that curve. And then we have a nice clean cut. I didn't add extra because this is a template layout sheet. So I don't want these to be bigger than the strips that I put them on. So then we can just go through and we'll cut this one out. Whoops, I don't want to lose that. So we're going to cut this next one out. Now, one thing you have to realize with your templates is if you accidentally do cut off one of the lines, it's not a big deal because all of your templates for foundation paper piecing are always larger than what you need, okay? And so it's not going to hurt if you accidentally trim it too small.
Threw it on accident. There's always tape for the templates.
I didn't show you, but Scotch tape, you can just tape it back together too. All right. So these two are both template layout sheet number 3. All right. This one is template layout sheet number 7. So I'm just going to fold it this way, and we're going to put that right there. And then we're going to grab another layout sheet. This one is template layout sheet number 6. So I'm going to put that on top of 7. And this one's number 6. So sometimes you get more than one template in a pattern. We usually figure one template per 8 layers of fabric. But when we work with patterns where you have multiple colors for the same units, then we'll normally slip in another template in there so you can have one for one color and one for the other color. Okay, so both of those are number 6s. So I'm just going to take a paper clip and we're going to clip these two together. This one is template layout sheet number 1, so it's going to go here. This one is template layout sheet number 2, that goes under number 1. And then these are number 3, so you should have 4 of the template layout sheet number 3. So that goes under number 2. So the only ones I'm clipping together is when I have multiples. This one is template layout sheet number 4, and we have 4 of those, so that goes under 3. And this one is template layout sheet number 5, and there's 2 of those. So now I have all my layout sheets in order. Okay, and we're just going to stack them right here like this. And now what we're going to do, the other thing I want to point out is on your foundation, or on the page 1, there's actually a little color layout here. There's the standard color layout, and then there's the alternative color layout. We're working with the alternative color layout. So what I would do is I would actually just take something and probably my highlighter, and I would just go like this and circle that so I remember which one that I'm working with. All right, so we're going to go to page 2. All right, so I grabbed the wrong pattern. I wasn't going to mark this one up. Oh well. We'll just go like that. So look at what I did on mine. So I went through and I put little fabric swatches on my fabric chart, and then I have an alternative fabric chart for all of my spikes over here. And the other thing I did, and I did that all when I was going through my pattern the first time to get familiar with it, I was also putting swatches here. So I came down here and it said template layout sheet number 1, and it says fabric A1. So I found template layout sheet number 1, and I put a little swatch on my layout sheet. I put a little swatch down here and a swatch up here where it told me what the color was, okay? So as I'm picking this up and I'm working, it's really nice because I don't get confused. I don't forget what colors I'm using. And that may seem silly, but at my age and as many things I do, I have a tendency to forget from one page to the next where I'm at, okay? So I really like this idea of putting all of these little swatches on your patterns, especially when it's something you're going to be coming back to over and over and over as you continue to build this quilt this year, all right? So I'm going to grab my fabrics. So this is the fabric that came in my pattern. And what I like to do before I start cutting is go through and pair all of my fabric up to my layout sheets, okay? So if I look, it says fabric A1, and on my little label it says template layout sheet number 1, And if I read here, it says template layout sheet number 1. So we're going to take template layout sheet number 1, and we're just going to paper clip that to that piece of fabric and flip it over. And then we have fabric A2, and when I look over here, template layout sheet number 2, and my little sticker says template layout sheet number 2, so that's my template layout sheet number 2. Do you see why I put all of these in order? Because I can start working, and even if their layout sheets aren't used in order, you know where to go in your pile to pull it out. So that's number 2. Then it says fabric A3, which is this one, and it says I want to use template layout sheet number 3. So these are all of my template layout sheet number 3. So these are going to get clipped onto this. Okay. And then we're going to grab the next one, and it says fabric A4, and this is template layout sheet number 4, it says. Now, these are pairing up 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. That doesn't happen in every pattern, because when you start getting into a lot of layout sheets in your pattern, sometimes you have to put template layout sheet number 1 and template layout sheet number 5 onto the same fabric. So that would all be in your instructions as you were going. Okay, fabric A5 is template layout sheet number 5 and number 6. So if I'd had multiple colors for my fabric 5, I would have had 2 layout sheets, but I only need really 1. Sometimes it's easier to do 2. So we're just going to fold those in there for now because it's just easier. All right. So now we have my alternatives. Okay. So from experience, I know that I want to keep all of my templates with the fabrics up front. Okay. So we're going to put this down here, those down there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is lay this one out. And because I'm doing the alternative, one of the first things it tells me to do is to separate my templates. So we're going to come in here and we're going to find cut line 1, because we have to separate these in order to put them on different fabric colors. Okay, and then we're going to go to cut line 2. And then we're going to find cut line 3. And then we're going to go to cut line 4, which is right here. And this one is cut line 5. If you guys do a lot of our patterns, if you get used to them, don't be surprised if someday you open one up and it says cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1. Just look at it as after you do cut line 1, then just cut line 1 again and work your way through it. Every once in a while, Bradley will forget to go in there and label those cut lines. Once we find it, we go in and get it fixed. But if it was printed that way, you're just going to have to figure out where those are cut, okay? And we give him a hard enough time around here that the rest of the world really doesn't have to. So, all right. So, one of the neat things about what I've done here is I don't have to read my numbers on my template anymore because I put these little swatches on there. So I know that this one goes to my green fabric. This gold one goes with the gold fabric. And then we have the orange one goes with orange. And we have red with red. And this one is purple. And this one was blue. So it's a lot easier to go through and sort all of those out before you actually get into the cutting, because now I'm not going to make the mistake of putting things on the wrong template or reading a number wrong. By the way, we have a dog in here. He's been sleeping. So, okay, so we are ready to start cutting. And I'm going to show you a few other little tricks here. So let's say you don't have time to get everything cut out. What we can do is we can come back here, and on your template it tells you what unit it goes to. So this goes to unit A1. So I'm going to put it in my bag with unit A1. And this one says unit A2, so I can put it in the bag with unit A2. This one says it goes with unit A1, and the one underneath it says unit A2. So these go into this bag. So if I don't want to make these right now, I have everything sorted to go with these template pieces, all right? And then this one, the next fabric says it goes with unit A3. And then all of these go with unit A3, okay? So I can pick and choose which bag I want to sort through, all right? So we're going to do a little bit of cutting, but we're not going to cut out everything because I have samples already cut out. And what I mostly want to do is get through all of the tips and tricks with this first pattern so that as the year goes on, you guys can continue to use some of these little tips that I give you. Okay, so on this one, this is my very first one right here. I'm going to put A1 on the top, A2, and this one is fabric A3 and A4, okay? And we're going to just start with my instructions. And it shows me how to put these on. It's telling me that I have to have 2.5 inch strips, which that's what came in your kit, so I don't have to cut them. And then when I go down, I can look at the pictures and read through it. And basically, it's going to tell me that I need 8 pieces, right? So we're cutting them all out of the same color. If I was doing 2 colors, then I would need 4 of each color. So I can take these pieces and I can stack this, and if I cut a strip here and I cut a strip here, and then I would go through and cut these strips here, okay? But I want to show you some other tricks here. So I'm going to show you a way that you can actually cheat on this. So instead of going through and cutting all of this apart, like we're doing, we can actually put the foundation papers right onto these strips if they fit, okay? Now, you can't always do this, but on this particular one I can. So I can actually take my foundation papers and open this up, flip it over, because you're going to glue. You always put the wrong side of the fabric to the wrong side of the paper. And I can pick this up. And it really doesn't matter which glue I use, because this fabric's not going to shadow anything. So if I don't want to reuse the repositionable, I could use the glue that dries as easy. I'm going to use the repositionable, and I'm going to just put a little bit of glue right down along that edge, and then I'm going to just glue it right onto my fabric. So this way I'm only doing my cutting one time. And then we can do the next one. When I put that glue on there, I want to make sure that I don't get the glue up underneath where my basting line is going to be. I only want it on the first unit, or the first section, I should say. Then we're going to take this. Oh, I wanted to show you something. So this is where my fold is right here. So this is where we like using our acorn pin, and I can just come in here and just get that wet with my starch, and my crease went away. So I no longer have a crease in my fabric where my fold was. And then we're going to put this one on here. Okay, so I can get 4 pieces on this. Now I can just come in here and just stack these pieces. So you can see that sometimes it's easier to do it this way, because when I set these up, I have to flip these over like this, and I basically did my work twice. Now, the more you do a paper piecing, the more you're going to look for little things like that, so that you can actually save yourself some time. So we're just going to get the last 2 of these on. Okay. Now, if I was reading my instructions, it probably tells me to go sew the TRP lines. At some point it's going to tell me to sew my TRP lines. And this one has a TRP line that matches up, okay? Now, I can take the whole stack right now, and, oh, I forgot to thread my machine after I cleaned it. Let's go ahead and get it threaded. Okay. And then we're going to bring the thread up. Okay, I can take these TRPs and I can sew them all right now. And I would usually do most of my TRPs, I do them at about a 2.2. And then I can just take the next one, chain it in here, and just run through and chain these, okay? Now, on this particular one, I could actually mark it too, but my fabric is so dark that I'm going to spend less time actually sewing my TRP lines and pulling them out than I would if I actually tried to mark it. By the time I cut the paper and try to figure out, get the marks on the back side and the front side, these are done. And I don't have to worry about my marks disappearing or anything. And when I'm cutting out my fabric, if I have TRP lines and basting lines, I will usually just sit down and do them right at the time that I cut them out, because then I don't have to go back and do them later. So I'll just go to my machine, and we're just going to take all of these, stack them. Whoops. If I can find the...
New to this and you're wondering what's a TRP line, it stands for Transition and Registration Point, and it's just a marker on the fabric. You actually go and pull those out after you've sewn it together. but it matches up to something else later in the design and makes it easier for you to be successful at not stretching a piece of fabric or, you know, getting everything matched up properly so it fits. So anyway, that's what it is.
Yeah, you're going to see here in just a little bit what we do with the TRP lines too. All right, so then the other thing I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut my threads on my TRP lines because I don't like to sew them into the seam allowances. They get caught up in, and then it's a lot harder to get them out. So if we just go through and quickly snip off the ends, just like when you're sewing, you don't, some people will leave their long threads and others clip every thread that they have. And it is cleaner to get them clipped. I am using my little rounded scissors so I don't have to worry about snipping holes in them. Now, the other thing that I'm gonna show you right now is these pieces actually have basting lines on them. And so we're gonna run these back through and show you how to do the basting lines. Okay, I'm not gonna do them all, I'm just gonna do one. But if you look on this side, there's a basting line right there. And I just run through and I chain them all at the same time. But I'm just gonna do one, and then, because I have some already done over there for some other demos. So we're just gonna lay this down. So if you're new to paper piecing and new to my techniques, one of the reasons why we do the basting line is because we're doing a curved seam here, okay? And when you do paper piecing, you fold the back and you trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But when you're putting on a bane like this, you can't fold back your paper around a curve and get that cleaned off properly. So we've created a different technique for using it. So we go through and we sew all these basting lines, and we use those basting lines as our 1/4 inch line, okay? So we're gonna just put those like that. This is just like it, so I don't need to cut that out. These are my actual veins, okay? They're very similar to that. That was the foundation papers, and now this is a vein. And so when we do our veins, that if you look at your picture here, it's actually going to show you these are set on there like this. And the veins go on the right side of the fabric, so make sure you're looking at your fabric, reading your instructions, and the veins are actually set up to where they always go on the right side of the fabric. And I do use the repositionable glue for my vein. I do not use any other type. I just use repositionable. And I'll take that repositionable and run it kind of right through the middle of the paper. And then we just lay that on there like this, okay? And I have a little bit of a crease right here. And I don't want that crease to get built into my curved piecing. So I'm gonna just take and get this out of there like that. And it just lays perfectly flat. And then we're going to put this one on, okay, and this one we're going to put on like this. I look at the pictures to see how the picture's telling me to lay those out, okay, and so that's good enough on those, okay, and then we're going to, I can come over here and put it on this end, or I can just squeeze them and there we go. Put another one right here. And leave a little bit of room between them because you don't want to cut these. We leave excess around our veins when we actually cut them out. And you'll see why here in just a minute. Okay. So let's get this crease out so it lays flat. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find our curved ruler, and you're going to cut this just a little bit outside the line. I like to cut outside the line on these because sometimes they move in the process of sewing. And then we're going to take this one. And I don't have to worry about cutting off the ends on them because that's all going to get trimmed off in just a little bit. Then you're going to get rid of the scraps you don't want. And the rest of the scraps, I usually will actually just take my scraps, and instead of putting them in a scrap bag, I'll actually put them back into the bag with everything, because then if I do make a mistake, I don't have to search for them. They're right inside the bag that we're going to use with it. Okay, so anything that's big enough to make a correction off of, just slip it back inside the bag right here. Okay, so now I have all of these done. And my next step would be to actually go through and sew the TRP line. And it's the same thing, you just chain the whole thing. I'll just sew, I don't even have to sew them because I have samples over here. So I'm just going to take these and put a couple paper clips on them and put them in my bag until I'm ready to finish this. Okay. So this is going to go back into this bag like that. And then this is the same exact technique, so I don't need to show you that technique. Okay. We're going to put this back away and put it down here with the pattern. Okay. So, oops, I forgot to put these in there. We want to keep these with them too, so that when I come back in a month and need to get these done for the next class, they're all right there. All right, so now we're going to go through and we're going to work with this big template layout sheet, okay? Let's put the glue back, the lid back on, lid back on. We're going to move a few things around here because we need a little bit more room. There's a little scrap. Okay, so this one, these are my big layout sheets. So what I'm going to do is open up my fabric, and it tells me in my instructions to set them up right side up. Okay. So the first thing that I like to do is look at my instructions and see, can I just go through and cut this into two pieces? And these are kind of on an angle, so chances are I'm not going to. So, all right, we're just going to lay them out here and do it, cut it the way the pattern says. So we're going to take And we're going to get rid of this fold in the middle. This stuff is so awesome because it gets rid of those creases to where you don't have to cut around them. You get full use of your fabric. So we're going to stack this. So one of the reasons we're doing all this cutting in this video is because I want you guys to be able to take what you learn here today and come back and review it when you go through the next boxes, because we won't always be doing all of the cutting like this because it's too many hours, okay? So we usually start with the very first one, and then we just work into more and more different techniques as we go. Okay, so we're going to take our big template layout sheets, and we actually have 2 of them, so we can actually don't even have to play a guessing game. So we're going to take this one, and it says, this is the first thing it tells me is Unit A template layout sheet number 5, which that's this one right here, and it's actually Unit A3. I think the 3 got covered up in the little graphic on there. Okay, so let's move it over here a little bit more because it has a little bit of an angle to it. Okay, and then we're going to take the next one and put it here. Now, I'm not hardly putting any glue on this piece. And even though this is black fabric, I'm still using it because it doesn't seem to stick very well to this particular piece of fabric. So then we're going to take this one and put that one right there like that. And then this one's going to go on here like this. So one of the things that you're going to notice is it's a little bit wrinkly. Doesn't matter. So we're going to grab, because these are big, I'm just going to grab a couple flower pins and re-secure that with the flower pins. Now, if I'd had a different type of fabric that wasn't black, I may have used more of the glue on there, but I didn't want to get a lot of glue on the black fabric, so I was pretty stingy with it. So this is when you could come through and say, use your pins instead. And then we're going to put another one down here. And I have a couple more right there.
Someone said, I see you're gluing it to the front of the fabric. Will it leave a residue?
No, I put just a light, and I tried it on here, and it really isn't leaving a residue on this. But if it will if you get too much, okay? So when you're using it on the layout sheets, be really sparingly. And when you're working with big pieces, the pins are the best way to go with it, all right? If it's a multicolor fabric, you're not going to notice any of that residue on there. It won't show up.
And remember,
and it doesn't hurt your fabric.
Yeah, and remember, that's the repositionable glue that she's using right now. And the other thing about that too is if you're a little bit concerned, you can just wave that piece of paper in the air a little bit after you put the repositionable glue on it. Let it dry for 5 seconds and then position it.
If you actually read the instructions, it says on your bottles that you actually let it dry for about 30 seconds. and then you put it where you want it to go. Okay, so I've got half of it on here. What I'm going to actually do is just take this and cut it right along there. Okay, and then we're going to pull this over. We're going to open this up like this, and instead of cutting these out and then coming back and replacing everything, I'm just going to flip the fabric like this. I don't even have to repin it because the fabric's not going to slide enough underneath that to make a difference. And now I can just cut along here. And in this situation, it's not a big deal whether or not you cut all this excess off. What's a big deal is that you cut the template layout sheets down to the size that you can actually get them together on your fabric. And now I have plenty of fabric here that if I make a mistake on something, I have enough here that I can actually make a correction. And so I like to utilize my fabric and save what I can when I'm working with stuff. Okay, so we're just going to take these. Okay, and now then I'm going to take this one. I'm going to cut this. Now, if I want, I can actually take this and lay it on top of here and just cut through all 8 layers at one time. Because it's not going to make a difference if I cut up or cut over a line on this bottom one because I have a good template on the top, all right? And that's exactly what I'm going to do because that way I don't have to worry about, I can also pull that template out of there if I want, but the reality is I'm not going to reuse the template. I did have pins in there, so I don't want to cut over my pins. And there is a chance of me cutting over the pins because if I didn't have it lined up perfectly. Okay, I don't have to repin this. Okay, on this one, I'm not going to cut this one out because all I'm trying to do is just show you the cutting process. So I'm going to just slip this one back in here. All right. And then I'm going to show you the cutting process on this. So now I'm going to look at this, and this is my cut line 1. Okay, and this one is my cut line 2. And this one is cut line 3. And this is cut line 4. And that template's just moving just a little bit, so I'm just going to move it over. And one of the things you'll notice on our papers that our cut lines are normally our sew side, okay? So when we set these up, because we want a straight line for the sew side. So when I'm done, I'm going to actually take and I'm going to put paper clips on it. Now this is a really long piece, so I'm actually going to put a couple paper clips in here like this, okay? And I'm going to look, and that's actually section 7. This one is section 5. So that's going to stay in order. This one is section 3. And this one is my section 1. And because I'm one of these people that I have a real issue with pins, I'm going to get rid of the pin because then I'm not going to poke myself when I go to put it in my bag. All right, so if I was cutting up the other side, then I would have everything stacked. So let's just take this and set it aside for now. And I'm going to go through and show you some tips, tricks on the strips there. So go through and look at your pattern. And it'll show you how it's going to lay out on there, okay? So some of these you have to cut all your templates. But on some of the bigger ones where we had to have 4 strips of fabric, I actually don't have to cut my templates apart. I can actually just leave those as a whole piece, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so we have this one. We actually have to open it up, and we're going to stack it right here, and I'm going to use my pressing stuff because I have to get 8 pieces out of this. So I want to make sure that I don't have that fold in there. And we're going to get rid of the little label off of it because I don't like to cut my labels. And then we're going to take this template and I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on the back of it. Place it on here, right along the edge like it tells me to. And then we're going to cut. And make sure you cut it to the size of the template. Don't cut it to what you think it needs to be, because these are really long spikes and it's going to make it a lot easier if you just have all that excess on there the way it tells you to do it. So now all I have to do is flip this over like this. Cut this one. Flip it over again. Cut down this side. Now in the process of doing this, sometimes you'll find that the fabric gets a little bit larger as you roll through and move things, readjust it. But it's not going to make a difference because we're not cutting to accuracy at this point. Okay, so this is scrap. And so on this one, this is actually for section 2. So section 2 is going to go underneath section 1, so we're just going to go like that. Now we're going to take the next piece, and the next piece I have to cut and open up the strips as well. So let's go ahead and get this. And repositionable glue right down on that tip. And this one's cut the same way as the other one. Whoops, got a little crazy with that cut, but we're good. As long as your sew side is a straight line, that's what's important. And my sew side on this one is actually the outside edge, which those are straight. All right, so this one here, this is for section 3, so that's going to go on there like that, and this is my section 4. Okay, we're working kind of from the top down, so I have to flip them over and then we'll flip them up again. So I'm only going to cut one more of these, and I'm going to show you the trick that I use here. So I had to have 4 of these strips. And so I just looked at this and I could see, well, I can get one in this half and this half right here. So I'm not even going to cut my template. I'm just going to stack all my fabrics right side up. And if you guys hadn't noticed, I cut all of my selvage off. I always get rid of the selvage when I'm working with these template layout sheets, because if I don't, I always end up with a chunk of salvage on the end and all of a sudden it's too small. So, all right, we cut that right in the middle. So now we have 8 pieces here, and all I have to do is just clip this piece onto here. So that will save me time. Plus, you'll find that when you have a bigger piece there, it's a little bit easier to get those really long strips going, okay? So then this one would be my section 5, and this is my section 6. This one's going to be section 7, okay? Okay, now I'm going to actually take these and fold them over like this. And so I didn't cut out all of the rest of them, but you can see the idea here. When I'm done and get all my cutting done, I will have everything in my sewing order from section 1 all the way up to the last section. And then I'll be able to start going through and doing my chain piecing, okay? So we're going to actually stuff these away, and we're going to start doing some paper piecing. We're going to put these in our bag. You guys know how to cut things out now. We'll just slip these back in here. Put these little pieces in here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to do your veins and why you have those TRP lines, okay? So these are my A units. What I did is I went up here and I glued my veins on to that basting stitch. So this is an A1. This is an A1, that's an A2, that's an A2, okay? So we're going to show you how that's done here. So I have my basting line sewn onto those pieces right here. And these are the veins that go with that. And these veins go with these 2 pieces, okay? So we're going to start using this glue right here, and this is a TRP template layout sheet, and so this is the right side of my fabric. So if I have a batik, and once I pull this off, it's really hard to tell which is the right side. So what I do is I'll take a chalk pencil or a lead pencil like this one, and I'll just draw a big X on the back side, and now I know which side is the wrong side of the fabric for the batik, because you have to know, because this is a directional piece, okay? It can only go on one way. So we're going to pull the paper off. Now I want to show you a little trick about that paper. So let me grab another, what did I do with it? Here it is. Sometimes you'll have units that'll have several TRP lines, and you're trying to get the papers off. It works really slick if you'll actually just take a fold template, piece of plastic, you put it and lay it down right on top of that line there, and you can tear, and then you can move to the next one. But when you're working with pieces, longer pieces that have several TRP lines, you can just tear every one of those, and it doesn't tear all the stitches out when you're trying to do it just by holding on to them. A lot of times you'll end up tearing half the stitches out, and by the time you get ready to assemble, all of those TRP lines, the threads have come out on them. So anyway, that's just a really good little trick, is to use your fold template to tear those off, right? So we have both those off. Now, I know exactly where I have to match. I don't have to try to make sure it fits, because I have this little TRP line, and all I have to do is just line it right up with that and put a pin in it. And then we can take the next one, line it up with that, and put a pin in it. I don't have to look for any marks that I marked. Did I mark them on the right side, the wrong side? It's just so easy with that little stitch there to figure out where it is. Now, we get a lot of people that say, oh, I just mark them, I don't use them. I tell you, I have less time into sewing them than I do marking them. And so now I can just grab this one. I don't have to look for marks. I know exactly where that's supposed to match. So it's going to go just like that, just the way I had it. So that one's going to go there. So when you look at your instructions on how to put on your vein, this is probably the first picture you'll see is actually matching up the TRP lines like that. Okay, so now that I have that matched, now I'm going to take my fabric glue pen, which is thin. We're going to roll it up. We're going to fold this back, and I'm going to run my glue. Oh, this one's shot. I kind of thought it was going to be. I tried to use it earlier. So we're going to put a new one in here. I broke it off because it was too dry. It's been 3 months since I've been in my video room. Okay, so now I have a new pin. I'm going to run that pin just on the inside of my basting line, and then I fold this back and I just glue the edges down, and it's going to ruffle my piece a little bit. So if you want to know where I put that glue, it's actually within the seam allowance area. So I'm not going to see the glue as long as I don't put too much on there. I just keep it right in the seam allowance. So I run it right along the basting line. And then we're going to do this side. I try really hard not to put the glue over the basting stitches on the TRP lines. It doesn't matter if it goes over this basting stitch because that gets cut off. But the TRP lines, if you glue over your TRP lines, you're gluing them into your fabric, and it makes it harder to pick them out. Okay, so that's all glued on there. And then we're going to grab the next one. And it doesn't matter which side you do first. When we're working with really long veins, a lot of times we'll have 2 to 3 TRP lines in there. So it distributes the fabric evenly for you. And everything just fits exactly the way it's supposed to fit. Okay, so I don't need to do the rest of these because I have plenty here to show you how to finish them. Okay, so now that I have those done, let's go ahead and we'll roll our pin up right now and find, oh, I keep forgetting that this is the one that just sits inside there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to actually put the paper on the top, and I'm going to sew on line 2, and it will do a beautiful job of that curve. I don't have to try to make sure I'm running a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If I want, I can also come along here and run my edge of my 1/4 inch foot right along the vein. Okay, I actually like doing it this way. You have to be a little bit careful about the way you hold it though, because you can't put your weight on it or you're going to sew the folds into it, the little gathers, okay? So you want that ruffle to be up to where there's no weight on it, and then the feed dogs will just pull that fabric right through. I have it glued. I don't need the pin in there anymore. So we're just going to pull the pins out of here. And we're going to take these over. And again, we're just going to run the chain. and chain PCs. So I'm on sew line 1. So I'm going to look and find, actually I'm on sew line 2 because it was basting stitch line 1 when I did the basting stitches. So this is sew line 2. See how I'm holding? I have my fingers, my hand between the paper and the ruffle on the bottom. Now all I have to do, and I'm going to downsize my stitch a little bit because I don't want my pressure foot to jump really fast when I'm doing this. I want it to go slower. The seam will be a lot smoother curve if you don't have a long stitch. What?
The way the camera's positioned, they can't really see that you're holding it up on the other side.
Okay.
But
I'll do it on the other side here in
just
just a
to
minute.
show them.
So what I'm doing is can you see that? Yeah. Okay. I'm just holding this paper up away from the ruffle. And so all I have to do is just hold it up just like an inch off of the table, and it leaves that fabric, and the feed dogs pull all of that fabric through evenly for you. Okay. So now I'm just going to lift this up, and we just continue sewing. All right, we don't need to sew all of them because you'll be able to see the way it goes together. All right, so now we're just going to take this and we're going to lay this down. There's not a single crease in there. Okay, and then we're going to grab our little starch pen, and I can run the starch pen on the back side, right on the seam, my stitch line. That's one way you can do it. And then when I fold it back, it just lays down really nice. Or I can run it on the front side and run it right in the ditch of that curved seam. And it lays that seam wide open for me. It's just no puckers. Now I'm going to take it to my iron. And we're going to press it. And we have this beautiful, flat, curved seam. So, a couple things I want to note for those of you that are beginners. When you're doing it, it's important that you sew right on that line. If you weave off the line, you're going to change the width of that little vein, okay? And you don't want, and when you get into little tiny veins that you're adding to your fabrics, that'll show up if you let that weave on you. So you want to keep that really, really, stay right on that line there like that. Okay, so now we're ready to actually trim the whole thing. Notice that my veins on there, I'm going to trim this side, and along the vein because the vein is too big. All right, and that's probably one of the biggest mistakes my students make when they're learning how to do this technique is after they sew the vein on, they forget to trim it. They'll trim everything else and they leave the vein and don't trim it. But the vein is paper piecing as well. It's too big. It's got to be trimmed down to the right size. So we're going to flip it over. We're going to grab our curved ruler here. First of all, I'm going to find my straight ruler, and I'm going to do my straight seams first. And I do like to cut the straight seams first when I'm doing my final trim. Okay. And now we're going to come back and we're going to trim around that outside. And we have to adjust the ruler as we go. But now I have this really nice curved seams, and I'm going to flip it over to the inside part of it. And that's almost a perfect match there. Okay. And then we're going to trim this little leg on the bottom, because that's a smart corner for curves. So when you put curves together, you have these really weird dog ears and you don't always know where to set them up. So we build all of these smart corners in so it actually lays right down and matches up perfectly.
To that, the sewing machine, you can get a close-up of that dog ear. Hold on.
All right. So this is what I'm talking about. This is my smart corner right there. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Right there. Okay. Now, the other thing why I'm here, as I'm going to show you, is, so see, I trimmed all the way around on my paper. I didn't leave any excess. Now, I'm going to flip this vein back, and we're going to clean all of this stuff out underneath it. All right? And that's the other thing people do, is they think after I trimmed I don't have to get rid of that, but you don't want to sew this other extra layer into your seam allowances, so we're going to get rid of it. To do that, we're going to come right down here with our rotary cutter, and we're going to cut right on the basting line, right down along there. Okay, so we're going to take this to our board.
Also, don't mix those steps up. Do this step. I had someone do that the other day, where they trimmed it away before they trimmed the outside edge, and then they were like,
they reached underneath here, they trim it off before they actually trim around the outside. And I'm going to go through that with you with this one, okay? So you have to trim everything around the outside first, and then we come back and we get rid of the excess underneath. And I'm trimming right. So when you look at my paper, I actually trimmed right on the inside of that basting line. So I have my whole basting line is on this trimmed off part. So what that's doing is that's leaving me a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to cut off this little dog ear right here. And now I'll show it to you there. I know that's going to be hard to see, but then can you see that?
yeah, you can see it good enough.
I'll put it over on this other camera too. So here's what it looks like on the back. A nice, clean, crisp.
Hold it down a little bit. There you go.
There we go. Nice, clean, crisp, scant 1/4 inch seam allowance on the back side of my vein. Isn't that nice?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do this one more time so that you don't have to rewind quite so many times. This is my first piece. This is where people make mistakes. They come in here and they clean this off before they actually cut and trim on the outside. But once you cut this paper off, you have nothing there to show you where to trim. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'm going to do it wrong so that you guys can see what happens. All right? So we're going to actually go through, and let's just go ahead and do it wrong. This is wrong, what I'm doing here. So I got rid of all of my excess, okay? But now look, I have nothing left to trim along. So now I have a vein that's too big. And that's when you get upset at yourself and you start calling Judy and you go, I need some more papers. But you don't. I'm going to show you how to fix it, okay? So let's go ahead and let's trim right along here. Get this one trimmed so I can still trim my straight line. And I can still trim my little smart corner. And I can actually trim right here. So let's go ahead and trim as much as we can with the paper. Okay. So now I have nothing else to trim. But you know what I have over here? I have another piece of paper that I have not pulled off yet. And I can actually take that and flip it over on this side. And I can hold that down and trim it to that size. And this will save you from having to wait a week to get a new piece of paper. Because if I send you a new piece of paper, you have to use that paper to do the trimming as well. So you might as well use this piece to do it. Now, if you make the mistake of trimming them all the wrong way, then you're going to have to get a hold of us and we're going to have to help you fix it, okay? So let's remember, let's go back and use this video if you have never done this, and let's do it the right way the first time. And there we go. They're so cute and they're so nice. Okay, that's enough about veins. And the lucky thing you guys have is you can rewind that video over and over again to watch that segment on those. Okay, so we're going to set these aside. Do you know what time is it?
Excuse me. It is 2:55, so you have an hour.
I have an hour. Okay, we're going to go through paper piecing. And then I have some pieces on the wall that I don't know if you showed them yet.
No, but I can.
Okay,
if you just
well, we can show them after a bit. But I'm going to be able to show you guys how to do the curved piecing.
These pieces on the wall over here.
There's a sample that we put together this morning. I know that sounds crazy, but I have 2 girls that do sewing for me, and we all came in at 8 o'clock and built that, all right? So we left one piece to do some paper piecing on. Instead of doing a stack of 8, I just thought, well, let's just save one, and I'm going to go through all of the steps on it. So I have them all laid out in order. Now, if I was doing 30 of these, I'd have 30 of section 1, 30 of section 2, all the way down, and I would just do one step 30 times, all right? So here's my foundation paper. So let's go through and give you a couple tips on the foundation paper, all right? Remember I said sometimes I use a black marker. I very seldom do, but a lot of my CIs do for beginners because they don't understand what they're supposed to do with it, and they can't see any lines on the back side of the paper, okay? So you can actually come in here and you can go to line 1, and there's a dashed line right along line 1, and that dashed line is your the edge of your 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is where your add a quarter trims all your fabric to. And you can take this, line it up, and you can actually just take and mark. I don't like to mark the whole line. I like to just do a few of them because otherwise I end up sewing on it, okay? So we can go through, and a lot of times if you'll just mark the first 3 or 4 lines, that's really all you have to do to get started. But now you can see the lines on the back and see how it's going to look, okay? The other thing that works is if you have a light table, you can actually take your light table, put it down, the light table will shine through, and you can actually take your ruler and mark the lines with your light table, okay? And 20 years ago, I didn't have a light table. And I wasn't using the black marker. what I did is I actually took my fold template and I laid it down here and I put it right on the dashed line, and then I folded the paper back and I creased the line, okay? And then I would take the top part of that section and crease the line. And now when I flip it over, I have all of the shape perfectly creased on the back. And then I would take a highlight pencil and mark just the one section that I was working with, which is actually this section. And for beginners, just go ahead and scribble where that section is with your highlight pencil. Now you know exactly where to put your first piece, okay? So this piece doesn't have a sew side. What it has to do is it has to fit over that section there, okay? You can do that from the back. Some people do paper piecing from the top. I do it from the back side of my paper, all right? So if I had a light table, I could actually take this piece of fabric and lay this on here, and I could see exactly where it was going to set with my light table. I want that to fit under section 1, okay? So we're going to grab our repositionable glue. I don't want to put glue on the whole back side of my fabric. I only want to put glue under section 1, nothing else. And you don't want to get it in the seam allowances or anything, just put it right under section 1. And then just let it sit there for a second, and then you're going to push it down into the fabric so that it lays flat on there, and it'll actually stick to your piece right there, okay? If you get that repositionable glue on the other sections, then when you go to fold over, you can't get your ruler up and down because it sticks to your ruler, all right? So we're going to actually take and use this ruler or fold template because it shows up better in my in the camera. But this is just a metal straight edge ruler. There's a lot of places that are actually just doing some of these. I know there's a couple companies that are doing some different ones that are white. I have a CI that buys them from one of the companies. Her name's Michelle Everts. And maybe one of these days I'll get that information from her. I keep saying that, and I never do. But anyway, I'm going to lay this ruler right on the solid line that's labeled line 1, okay? Don't put it on the dash line because the dash line is where your seam allowance, the edge of your seam allowance. So you want to be on the solid line, and you're going to fold your paper back along that fold template there. And then we're going to grab our add-a-quarter ruler, and we're going to use a big one for this project because we have some really long lines. So we're just going to start with the big one. We're going to butt it right up against there, and then we're going to grab our add-a-quarter ruler, and we're going to trim. Okay? We're going to get rid of all of that stuff. When I'm doing paper piecing, I don't like to have anything on my table other than what I'm working on, okay? Because you're going to be flipping your papers back all the time. And that's garbage. So now I'm going to take this, and this is my sew side. So anytime I talk about a sew side, that is the side, the first seam that you're going to actually sew. So when I've stacked all my papers, I have all of my sew sides away from me. So now all I have to do is just pick this piece of fabric up, lay it down here, lift this, and put it on top. And that's it, okay? So if I want to see where that shape is, I can come back here, and I'm going to go ahead and mark line 2 so that you guys can see where I'm at with the camera. So I'm going to mark along this dashed line here. Okay. Now when I take this and I have to fold this back. I'm trying to go to the next step. So here's my section right here. And if I actually scribble on this so you guys can kind of see, there's my section. That section is exactly the same size as the dashed line that's printed on my template piece. So all I have to do is get rid of the paper clip, get rid of the fabric, and basically line that up. Not get rid of the fabric, get rid of the paper. So we're going to get rid of the paper and just set it right in front. And now you can see basically where that's supposed to set. So if I look, there's my point. So I have about 1 inch of fabric that right from the point down. Okay? Oh, dog's decided he needs to go outside again. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to lift this fabric back. And I'm going to glue those raw edges together. And because we're working with a really long piece of fabric, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to actually put a flower pin right here at the top of the paper, because that's going to keep my fabric from shifting underneath my fabric paper, because I could only glue right here. I can't glue all the way up here. So by pinning right here, that's going to keep that from shifting. So you're going to be using your glue and your pins as you're doing these really long, skinny spikes. But they're so cool looking when you're done. Okay, so we're going to go to the machine, and we're going to find line 1. And we're going to start about 1/4 of an inch before line 1, and then we're going to stop sewing about 4 stitches past the end of line 1. Okay, and it's the solid line that you're sewing on. And your stitch length should be running, like on this machine I run it at about 1.8. On most of my machines I run it at about 1.8 to a 0.9 on most of our sewing machines. I do work with a lot of Berninas. They all vary just a little bit different in stitch length. Okay, so we've got that first piece sewn on there. And I'm going to point out really quickly. Can you see where I'm at here? Down. Okay. So right here is my line, my dashed line. So I'd stitched past that dashed line about 1/8 of an inch. All right. And the reason why is because when I fold back to trim my next piece, it cuts all my threads off. So we're going to flip this over, and we're going to take this and we're going to press. And we can do, if we have that little, I don't know if this is going to work for doing finger pressing. On batiks, this works really good for finger pressing, but this is a cotton, so I'm going to actually press it with my iron. All right, so I have a nice clean press. Check to make sure you don't have any little folds in there, okay? Because you have really long, skinny spikes, and if you get a little fold in there, it'll add 1/2 inch to that spike on you. So pay attention to that. Now we're going to flip it over, and look, I have this long tail here. You're going to have these as you're building it, so I'm just going to get rid of that tail so that I don't have to deal with all of those long tails as we're sewing. So we're going to find line 2. Okay, and I like to just keep the templates as I go. They all have a little bit of repositionable glue on them. I just stack them here, so if I make a mistake, I can actually just reach over there and I have my templates. This one, here we go, line 2. Fold back. Remember, I sewed past, and so now I have to lift this and tear the paper loose right here. Sometimes it'll tear a big hole in it. Don't worry about it. It just means it's going to be easier to remove when you go to get rid of it. So all we want to do is make sure that that fabric lays flat before we put the add a quarter ruler on there. And now we're going to trim. So we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to turn it this way. We're going to find the next piece of fabric that goes underneath there. This is my sew side, and this is the sew side. And look, this is going to come right down to the edge of the paper. So all I have to do is just look at, see how far down that goes. And when I lay that one on, I didn't have to do any flipping or anything because I'm working from the back side. I just lift it and put it on my fabric. I have right sides together right here. When you work off of the front, you have to flip all your fabric before you can put it on with this technique. So everything is stacked right side up, and we don't have to flip anything. I'm going to look right at the edge. I have leftover fabric on my edge. And then the next place I wanted to look, and you can kind of see my lines, this is the edge of that piece. The other thing you can do is you can kind of take this and see where that is. And you can see that I have all this excess fabric there. So I don't even have to really fold anything back. I can see that the fabric's underneath there, okay? So your template has a lot of tricks to it. If you just read those templates, you can see exactly the position in which you're supposed to put everything in. We're going to grab our glue stick. We're going to open this up, and we're going to glue. Just a second. I do want to bring something up. So when you set this down like this and then you come back and open this up to glue, sometimes it's easier to actually put that glue on there before you lay the paper down. So you can actually glue along that edge and put it there. I used to tell people, no, that's not a very good way to do it. And then I started losing the feeling in my finger, and then I realized that's a really good way to do it. So, you know, sometimes things change, your thought processes change. But gluing before I put that down there, then I don't have to worry about this sliding around on me, especially when I'm doing layers of them, because as you layer and do 20 at a time, they're going to slide on you, and then you come back and you have to lift each one off. So gluing as you go does work pretty good if you can't feel the fabric enough to lift that apart. Okay, we're ready for line 2. So I'm going to start about a 1/4 inch before the dashed line at that end, so all the way up to this end. So basically we're going to go zoop like that. And if I was doing 8 off, we'd just keep chaining them right underneath our pressure foot. Okay, again, we're going to grab our starch pen. I'm just going to put the starch on the back of this, fold this over, touch it with an iron. Just double check and make sure I don't have any folds in my point. Flip it over, and then we're going to put the fold template on line 3. We're going to fold it back. We're going to fold the fabric with it. We have this sewn to the paper, so we're going to lift the fabric, and we're just going to tear that back. All right, so my fabric's laying flat. Pick up the add a quarter ruler. Trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to take this and line it up there. We're going to grab the next piece. And at this point, I really don't have to mark things anymore because I can see that I just have to have fabric under both, all along that edge there. So we're just going to take the template, put it like this. We're going to grab our glue pen. We're going to run the glue down along that edge. Okay. And then we're going to lay this on there. Press the glue into each other along those raw edges. Pick it up. And so one of the things that I am going to show you is if you have a hard time getting it from here to the machine, just grab one of those little flower pins and just go ahead and put the pin up here at the top. And now I can focus on holding on to this part and I don't have to worry about that getting caught and pulling anything away. Now we're going to start right down at the very bottom and we're going to sew on line 3. Well, it decided to catch and sew a little loop in my, there we go. And we're going to flip this over, put some starch, go to the iron, press, okay, and it's always a good idea to look at that before you start the next piece to make sure that it's all covering, because when I'm looking at this I'm like, oh, it doesn't cover here. But wait a minute, when I look on this side, here's my bottom. I still have a 1/2 inch of coverage there at the bottom. I didn't need to be all the way down to that point because this is the line that I needed to be on, and I went off of my paper there. Okay, so let's go to line 4. We're going to place a fold template on line 4, the solid line, fold it back. Then we're going to grab the fabric and we're going to tear that down. So on these long lines, spikes like this, that tear lines could end up that long, okay? So don't be surprised if you have a long tear in there. It's just fine. And now we're going to take this, add a 1/4, trim, take it over here, grab the next piece. Look at this one's going to come right in and follow my paper. So see how that's going to line up there? All right. So all I have to do is just lift this up, put some glue along that edge there. It doesn't have to be a lot of glue, just enough to hold. Just touch it. Leave about a 1/4 inch down at the bottom there where it's folded back. Push it into each other. Open it up, and again, let's go ahead and grab your pin and pin right along the top side of that paper, and now we don't have to worry about that pulling. Then we lift this one up and we just start this one. We can hold on to it. Find the bottom of line 4. And we're going to just continue to repeat that process until you get all of the pieces sewn on to your unit. Okay? So I'm not going to go any further with this. We're going to move on and go over some curved piecing. So when we get this done, you're going to have to go through the trimming process. So you're going to have all this excess, all right? As you're doing this, remember, keep adding those pins. When you start working down on this side, you're going to find you don't need the pins because you don't have a lot of the excess length, near as much excess length there, okay? So to store this so that I don't lose my place, I'm actually going to take this and we're going to fold back and we're going to go ahead and trim line 5 at this point. So we're going to fold this back, tear along there. I forgot to put any starch on it, but that's fine. We're going to go like this. Trim this off. And now I'm just going to take my stack here, okay, and we're going to get all of this lined up, and I'm going to line that piece right up with that, and then we're going to find some of these binder clips, and we're going to clip those together, and then we're going to come down here, we're going to clip this together like that. And then we can take this and set it aside until we can come back to it, all right? Okay. That was a pretty good demonstration on paper piecing. I would say so, since I am a professional at it. That worked pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start showing you how to remove the paper and how to sew your little curves and how this fits together. Now, let's look at our instructions, because you guys are not going to sew the star together. All you're going to do is make the star points and then leave them until you get the next step, because this piece, these assemble from the inside out. So before you can sew up the star, you're going to sew all of the other pieces on. And the reason we do that is so we don't have Y seams. And if you had to come in here and try to sew in Y seams on all of those, that would be miserable, all right? So all you're going to do is just finish up these units right here. On your veins, on these little curves that went in there, those are 2 different sizes. So I want to go through that if you come over to the wall. So basically, when you look at this, one of these is shorter than the other. She's going to move, okay. All right, so this vein is a smaller vein, and this one's a longer one. But when you assemble these veins, when you put them together, this vein does not come up and match that seam. It actually sets down. One vein goes over the top of the other one. So there's no matching point there, all right? And when you come down to the bottom, after we put this one in and then this one sews on, this one sits below this piece by a 1/2 inch. Well, actually, that's more like 1 inch. So don't call me and say that your pieces don't fit. They're not going to fit together until you're ready to actually start assembling the whole quilt. So you're going to have all the parts done all the way out to the 3rd border before you can actually sew it together. You can put it on the wall and pretend it's sewn together, but if you try to sew it together, you're going to have to pick it all apart, okay? So we're going to take this piece right here, and then we're going to take this piece right here and sew those in for you. If I have time, I'll do this twice, because then you can get more of a feeling as to how that sets. But see how that is, how that sets? This one fits in here, and then this one comes way down over the top there. But when you look at your units, you have a wide piece here. So there's that much, that's like almost 2 inches from this point to this point. When you come over to here, you only have about 1 1/8 right there, okay? And that's why those pieces don't match up the way you think they're going to match up. And it's because of the way the veins fit together when we start to assemble this block, okay? We're going to remove the paper. We have to remove the paper from this piece because we're going to do the curved piecing on this, but we don't have to remove this. We're going to leave this paper on because the paper is going to stabilize this as we try to put that curve in. Okay, so we're going to start with line 13, and remember that little trick I showed you with the fold template? I can actually just take this and I can tear all of that right up there like that, and then we can loosen up the next piece. And I will tell you that, yeah, these aren't exactly fun to pull apart, so just be patient with it and do a good job. Get rid of the paper. And that's where a purple thing comes in handy because I can get this up underneath there. And if my purple thing isn't sharp enough, I can grab my stiletto.
That little awl thingy that we gave
Yeah,
them?
the little awl will actually work as well because this doesn't poke through your fabric near as much, and you can loop that in there like that. It's really cool. See, I can just tear that right up that seam with that. It's just so cool.
Maverick.
All right. I'm not the type of person that uses a lot of tools, but when I find a tool or a new little trick that I love, I use it. So I'm always game to hear what people have to show you and how to use it. The other thing that works really good, and oh yeah, I do have a pair, is you also have your tweezers. So as you're pulling those and you get into a hard part, just grab the tweezers and get that excess out with your tweezers. It'll just come right off. Okay, when you're pulling something around those TRP lines, now we didn't finish that other piece, so I should probably mention to you that after you get the paper piecing done on your foundation papers, then you go back and you look to see if you have TRP lines. And you sew the TRP lines before you trim. And this one actually has a TRP line here and one here, which will match up to those veins. Okay? So let's just take this. Let's take that. Luckily, we only have 8 of these. Because it does take time to get rid of the paper. I like this one better. That little curve really, really helps to get in there. It doesn't go through my fabric like the stiletto does. So when you guys get your boxes, if you haven't gotten them already, don't lose that little tool. Did you guys put them in every box? Did you know?
We did those for the large box. We didn't do them for the small box because the small box got Roxanne's basting glue.
Oh, okay.
And so the large box got these little guys because there's applique pieces in the small box.
Oh.
So, but and all the small boxes, so I don't even know if you know this, but we stagger the videos out a month after the boxes are delivered. So everybody should have their boxes by now.
Even the Canadians?
That's somewhat of a good question. Our Canadian, if you're from Canada and you're joining us today, I think most of them have gotten it, but we've had a lot of shipping troubles to Canada because with the strike, everything was held up, and it's all, whether you guys know this or not, but all of our mail that goes to Canada has to go to Los Angeles first. So some people have been like, why is my box clear down in California? They've been sending it down there, and it's been stuck in a holding spot down there while they manage the mail into Canada. So
that's got to be a big storage container.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably multiple warehouses of space to keep it all organized and sorted, and because they have them on the Canadian side too, from what I understand. So we started to get approval to ship them in, I don't know, January 6th, I think, or like right at the beginning of the month. Maybe it was the 2nd. And then we've had it, they have stopped us from shipping a couple times. They'll be like, oh, we're not shipping today because the warehouses are full. And then we'll get a notification that they'll allow us to ship again. So if you're wondering why it went to LA, that's why it went to LA. And I don't know, I heard through the grapevine, and everything is changing and crazy, but that Canada may go on strike again in May, but I don't know if that's been resolved because I don't keep up on that part every day. So that was only if they couldn't come to some other resolution. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So anyway.
Okay, so we got the paper off of this one. So now what we're going to do is we have a TRP line here, and we have a TRP line right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take and match those TRP lines, and then I'm going to put a flower pin in there to hold that in place. Okay, so now that I have that matched, now I know where everything else is supposed to come together, all right? This is the smart corner here, but I want to go over a couple little tricks here. So remember, we have these really long tails, okay? And so if I fold this back right here, I'm going to actually loosen that TRP line a little bit there, and I fold this back. See, I have a long tail on this side, and I'm going to clean that tail, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to clean this tail, and then I'm going to clean this tail, and then we're going to fold this one back, and we're going to clean off that tail, and we're going to fold this one back, and we're going to clean off that tail. Okay, I don't have tails on this side, okay, because these were going just the opposite direction. So the other things that happens when you have that these inside curves like that is a lot of times this will fray on you. So you can actually, there's a couple things that we can do, okay? And I'm not sure that this is going to work because it's probably plugged, because I haven't been in here for 3 months. But let's find out. And if it's plugged, then we're going to use something else.
While you're testing that, someone asked about your iron, just like every video we do. The iron is popular.
But no, it's not for sale, and no, I don't recommend it.
Someone said, where did she get it? It came from an estate sale. One of our employees picked it up one time, and so we just keep it in here because it's small. But also, you don't use an iron like that on the
wool mats.
On a wool mat,
it'll burn all your fabric.
It burns through the fabric. Ask us how we know. And also there's some setting. Well, actually there's a wool setting on it. If you flip it to that, you'll have better luck, but I still just wouldn't even do it.
But it's an older style antique iron, and so it has the cotton cord, you know, so you don't know when that's going to burn up on you. So it's cool. But you can actually, if you look on it's called a Durabilt, Durabilt. And every once in a while, if you go out there and search them, you can find them on the internet for sale from people. So, all right, so let's go over this. I prefer the acorn glue. I don't use the Roxanne glue for this technique because Roxanne dries really hard. But this acorn, if I had unplugged it before class, then I would have put the glue right underneath each one of these seams. But because I didn't unplug it, the tip, we're going to use this one. So I'm going to actually come in here and put just a little bit of glue right on the seam allowance. I'm going to lift the seam back and glue that. What I'm doing is I'm gluing that thread so it won't back off on me, okay? And we're just going to keep going down on that like that. And I'm going to come over and we're going to glue this side as well. Just put a little bit of glue right at the very end of that. And that'll keep that from backing out. And then I can lift that seam open and do the same thing on the open seam as well. Because now I'm not going to have any issues with fraying of fabric. And this is a Tim Holtz fabric, and I love his fabric, but it does fray when we're doing the paper piecing and stuff. And the biggest reason why you see that happen so much is because we work the fabric more than you would if you were doing traditional piecing. You're just handling it a lot more, so you're going to have more of an issue with it fraying. Okay, so we got all of those so that I don't have to worry about those seams coming apart for me. Now we have one more issue in this that I want to go over. And remember we clipped all of that? Well, we're going to come down here and we're going to grab these tall ones along this straight edge, and we're going to do the same thing on these. So we're going to fold all of these back. This just takes the bulk out of your seams when you start assembling your quilt, because you've taken half of it. It's like clipping something. It's taken half of that fabric away. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. We're just going to grab a little bit of glue, and I'm not going to glue this one twice because I really don't need to on that one, but I'm just going to quickly glue right there at the end so that I don't have to deal with any threads coming out. So when you do paper piecing, you're cutting that thread right along the edge, and so it's really easy for it to back out. So now I don't have to worry about that now. Now I'm going to take this piece and we're going to come back. We're going to put that pin back in there. And get that right on the edge. Okay. Now we're going to grab our glue stick again, and I'm going to put glue right along that edge, and then we're going to start at the end here, and we're going to line up that smart corner, which goes like this and then starts around the curve. So it's a straight edge and then it starts right along the curve, and that just fits perfect. Okay, it's absolutely a perfect fit. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take that smart corner and it's going to come down here along the curve and then right over here like this. So we're going to put the glue on there, run this all the way back to the pin, and then we're going to grab this, we're going to roll it around and match the corners. So straight here, start the curve up here, run it back there, And now I have this perfectly matched, okay? So the next thing we're going to do before we sew it is we find some newsprint. You probably should be able to find some, and cut up these little tiny tabs like that. Because when I start sewing, I'm going to sew on that, and then I'm going to lay that piece right on there. And the feed dogs will pull my newsprint through, and they'll also pull that through. And I can do a perfect 1/4 inch seam. But the other thing that I'm going to show you is, so when you're doing this, it's basically you have a curved seam. And if I took my ruler and I laid this ruler down here and I drew a curve along there, it's basically the curve that I'm going to be sewing here. Now I can see exactly where I'm going to start sewing up in here. So I know where to place the foot, and it's going to come right in at a 1/4 inch. And when we stop, we do the same thing. All right? So I can take this little piece of paper and I can actually draw on this. Okay? And when I stop, I'm going to allow my foot to run right along that line there. So let's start sewing on my paper. We're going to line it up to that line on my paper. Okay? And I want to put my needle down, the down position. There we go. And now we're going to get rid of this pen. We don't need the pen anymore. And we're going to hold on to this. And I'm going to lay that fabric underneath my pressure foot, line it up to the line, and I'm going to start sewing. And we're sewing a 1/4 inch seam.
The curved ruler is available on our website. Which one did you use there?
I used the diamond ruler.
So we have a few of them that are at different, some of them are tighter,
yeah,
wider, thinner. They just fit different curves. So that one was the curved diamond and cutting trim. Curved diamond and trimming ruler, right?
Yeah. That's what it says.
Yeah.
Curved diamond, cutting and trimming ruler.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to take my other little piece of paper before I go sew off that point. So I'm about 1 inch from the bottom. I'm going to lift the pressure foot, and I'm going to line up my line, or the edge of my the raw edges up with that line that I drew. And then I'm going to put the pressure foot back down, and I'm going to sew. And I'm just going to keep following that line. And as I get down there right towards the end, I'm going to grab my little tool here, this awl, and I'm going to grab a hold of that point and pull it back just a little bit so it lines up perfectly, because I didn't get enough glue on it. Okay, I'm going to hold it back there. All right. So now when I open this up, I'm going to have a straight edge right here, and I'm going to have a straight edge down here, and I do. All right. The only time I've ever really done the drawing on those papers like that is when I'm putting on some kind of a little vein like this in here, because otherwise you can't get those tips sewn in, and that paper underneath there allows you to lay that tip down on the paper, and if you line it up, then you don't end up veering off and sewing it in the wrong spot, because when it opens up, it's supposed to be a straight seam. Okay? Now then, the next thing I would do is I would probably go back to my instructions and look to see what way is it telling me to press. And on the And that's actually probably right on this sheet that came off the newsprint. So it's telling me to press this one into the seam here. So the only time I ever press anything into a seam, like a lot of seams like that, is because I may want like an opposing seam or something. So let's look and see, do I have an opposing seam here? No, not really, but so on this one you really could press it either way because it's not going to match up to the other seams, okay? So whenever you see our pressing instructions, you have to realize that they're all done on CAD. So when basically you have CAD operators that don't know anything about sewing, all they know is what they've been told to do on CAD. And normally what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll set everything up. I'll say set everything up to where it goes clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever way I choose to tell them. But normally Bradley sets everything up to where it presses clockwise on looking at the front side, okay? And if you don't like the way that's pressing, you can change it. It doesn't mean that our instructions are wrong. It's just a choice. We do it all over. And then if I'm sewing and I decide I want to change something, I change it. But when I change it, then I come in here with my highlighter or a red pencil, and I'll come in here and I'll highlight that so that when I come back to do the rest, I'll go back and remember, oh, I must have changed the pressing on that. And so I use a red pen and I usually just highlight it. And that way I can keep track of it and do the same thing all the way through it, all right? So I'm going to take my starch pen right here, and we're actually going to take this and I'm going to press this down and get this starched really well here. And now I'm going to have to remove the paper from this part because I'm going to be sewing another curve into it. So I don't want that paper there. Now I can tell you from looking at this now that if I leave it this way, it's going to add a little bit more bulk right here, okay? Than if I had actually pressed it back. It would probably, the next curve would probably press better if I did press it back. So I'm going to press it back. So the only way to tell whether or not that's going to be the case is that to actually just look at it and see if you're going to like the way it's going to look that way or whether you're going to like the way it's going to press the other way. So I can tell that it's going to cause a lot of bulk right here. So I'm actually going to press it back this way, the way the pattern instructions tell me to do it. All right, so we're going to press that. Get a nice clean press. And don't get all undone if it doesn't look like it's just like laying perfectly flat, because you have a lot of seams coming in on that curve. And that'll take care of itself as you start sewing your quilt together, because your feed dogs will pull all of this loose stuff in when it starts to, you start to assemble all the blocks, okay? So now we're going to take this one, and that one's going to go in just like that, all right? And this comes down and goes right over the end there like that. And I have a little bit of a fold right here that I know is going to get sewn into it. So let me show you a trick. I don't want that fold there, so I'm going to open this up and I'm just going to put some glue along there, and then I'm going to glue that the way it's supposed to be. And it's doing the same thing here, so I'm going to put some glue in there, and I'm going to glue that so that I don't get a little pucker in there. All right, it's looking good. Okay. So find my TRP line, So notice that I did not have to worry about how it was going to fit, because I knew it was going to be perfect. And the reason why is because I started in the perfect position because I had those TRP lines. I didn't have to measure here and here and test it. I knew it was going to match. So we're going to find my TRP line right here, and that's going to go and line up right there. And we're going to grab a flower pin, put a pin in there, hold that in place, and we're going to start down here at the bottom. And now if you can't do this really fast, then you'll have to do it a couple times because it dries really fast on the cotton. That glue does. By the time I get up here, I may have to put more glue on it. So you're also going to have to deal with the fact that you have a lot of seams there and it's going to stretch on you. So you have to get that to ease in, but you know that it's got to fit in there. So if you have a little bit of fullness, just work that down with your glue until it fits in there the way it's supposed to fit, okay? Well, we're going to do this side here. I'm going to put more glue on that point because the last time I didn't have enough. So we're going to take that and get that all glued in position here. Then I'm going to pull my pin out and I'm going to touch up right along the pin and make sure that those raw edges are all matching. And there we go. Okay. Now, since we're showing tricks today, you can get these little tiny pins like this. And to help you hold this so it doesn't pop loose, I can actually take this and I can lay this down to where it lays flat, put a pin in there, and then I can fold this over like that. And I can put another little pin in here. And then I can pull this around like this. And I can put another little pin here. And then we can pull it around like this. And we'll put another pin in this one. But this just stops it from popping loose because of the cotton fabric. The glue has a tendency to pop loose. The heat set glue that I was that I showed you, that stuff doesn't pop loose. It softens over time. It's just a really nice glue for what I'm doing here. I should have been thinking about it when I was getting ready to do the demo. I should have gone in there and cleaned the tip out of it. Okay. So now when I go, I don't have to worry about all of this stuff moving because I have it all pinned down and stabilized with my paper. So we're going to take this and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a little bit of a curved line on there. Gives me something to follow. And then we're going to do it on the bottom one as well. It doesn't matter where you do it, just right basically in the center. Now we'll take one of those and we'll start sewing on my line. Line the pressure foot up to the edge, just as if that's the edge of your fabric. And just start sewing a little bit. Then lift your the pressure foot up and line that up to the point on my smart corner. And now the edge, and we're going to just start sewing. And I'm going to use my little tool here to hold some of those seams down because I'm sewing into the seam. There were a couple of them that the glue didn't hold it down the way I wanted it to. Let's keep going. And now we're gonna getting too tight of a curve here, so we're gonna get rid of some of these pins so that the fabric will relax. Because when I start pulling the fabric back like that, what that does is it flattens the fabric in front of my pressure foot, usually about 1 inch to 1.5 inches by just taking this, lifting it up, and pulling it back. Then I got rid of all chances of having a little pucker in there. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna find my other little piece of paper. What did I do to it with? There it is. Lift this up, put this paper underneath it. And there we go. Pull the paper off.
It's 3:55, so that was perfect timing.
Oh, did I do it perfectly again? All right, so we have a pin here to pull out. And that's sewed down there really nice. And this one says to press it this direction as well. So we're going to press it into the seam, into all the seams. And like I said, you guys can make up your decision on what you want to do there. Okay, do whatever you feel works the best. So I'm going to just hit that with an iron really quick, and then I'm going to get some starch. Just going to get that to lay down. And then I just run the starch right in the ditch on that seam.
Someone said, Judy makes it look easy, but I think there's a learning curve here for sure. These videos are so helpful.
Well, you get a lot of tips in the video, and even when you're like taking a class, sometimes it's hard to get all those tips in because there's always so many questions that you're trying to answer. And here I get to control the conversation. So anyway, I have that pressed.
But I would say another big part of it is just learning how to use the paper as a tool.
Yes,
I mean, that's true. The whole point of the paper.
Look at that. I have, when I'm looking at this, I can tell that on this side, I'm just a little bit skinny on my seam allowance right there. So I think I'm going to go back, but this side just lays down perfect. And this one kind of has just a tiny jog in it. So I'm going to go in and just put some paper under there. I don't want that piece that has repositionable glue on it. And I'm going to start sewing here. And there's just about a 1/2 inch there that is just skinny. So I'm going to fatten up the seam a little bit. And there we go. And basically what that was is I probably pulled in about a 1/16 of an inch on that. And now when oh yeah, that's much better. All right. So when you look at it, this is what I was saying. Let me press really quick. when you set this up, note that this one and this one, they're about 3/4 of an inch difference in the height of what you're doing there, okay? And so when I put this onto my next piece over here, the short side of this is going to sew onto the long side. And what happens is this vein lands right underneath at the bottom of that, so that you don't have to match those veins, because this one lands right underneath it. We use this technique in one of our patterns called, it was one of the technique of the months 4 years ago.
Coral reef.
Coral reef. We used that. We started that technique in coral reef, and we loved it. So we've been going forward with it, where you have one vein comes up and the other vein comes in right underneath it, so you don't have to match all of those points there. All right. That's it, you guys.
Okay, well, it's
Hope you enjoyed it.
4 o'clock on the nose, so we are done for today. If you did the small box, we'll be back in a month-ish to do the Polish star. Otherwise, we will see you guys, I don't know, probably sometime in, doing the math in my head, June. We'll see you in June. And we are putting the rest of the videos up online, and we'll post them to the Quiltworx Box Club group. So if you're not part of that, join the Box Club group, and then you can join us for the next video. So anyway, thank you guys, and we will see you soon. Goodbye.